Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, depending upon where you are. And I'd like to welcome you to It's Alive, animation techniques that bring to life SharePoint Framework and list formatting SharePoint solutions from David Warner and Hugo Bernier. Take it away, David.
All right, thank you, Stacy. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our session today. Thank you for attending M365 Philly Virtual. It's exciting 3 days. Hopefully, you've been enjoying the sessions, and we appreciate you joining our session today. As Stacy had mentioned, we're going to cover some animation techniques that bring to life some SPFx and list formatting solutions. Clearly, we like to have a little fun. You can see by way of the graphic there. Hugo and I are big on humor, and so we look to enjoy this session together today. My name is David Warner. I am an MVP and a employee of Catapult Systems and a PNP team member. As you can see from the images here, I'm a big sports fan, but I'm an even bigger fan of the community and love to engage with the community in any way that you are interested in engaging. So if that just means working together on some projects, or you're looking to contribute to the PNP initiative, then let's definitely collaborate and take advantage of some of those opportunities that are presented to you. So let's definitely connect. Feel free to reach out to me at my Twitter handle, as well as my email there if you would like. With me today, as we turn into the dark side of our images, is Hugo Bernier. Now, he's having a little Teams difficulty today, so hopefully he'll be able to chime in here. His connectivity has had some problems, but hopefully we can get him added here and have him in there. But he is an MVP as well. He has been working with SharePoint since before it was SharePoint, when it was Tahoe, and so we know we're with an expert when you know he's been involved well before SharePoint was even SharePoint. He is a member of the PNP team as well, and a very good friend of mine, and so I'm excited to be presenting with him today. All right, so what is the agenda for us today? Well, we're going to talk about some reasons for animation, and if Hugo can't join or get the audio working, then I'm gonna do my best to talk through some of the reasons for animation. That's the section that he's passionate about and covers quite often for this session. So we're going to cover that, and then we're going to talk about some no-code techniques. Right, so no code is a little bit misleading sometimes, because we know that behind every single solution, whether it's SharePoint or a custom app dev, Teams, Power Apps, it doesn't really matter. There's really some code, but we're going to talk a little bit about more on how you can take advantage of what we like to phrase as no code techniques. Then we're going to talk about some low code techniques. So we're going to get a little heavier. You're going to see a few more curly braces going on there, but nothing that's so big and demonstrative that it's going to be scary. So if you're not necessarily heavy into coding, but you're comfortable working your way around a few curly braces, maybe some JavaScript, then that might work out for you. And then there's never really been a transition from no code to low code and beyond that. So we decided to call it Mo code. So we're going to cover some Mo code. So those animation opportunities that require a lot of code, or some Mo code, is what you're going to see taking place there. And we're going to see how you can bring your creations to life. We're going to cover some techniques and some resources that are available to you to take advantage of. All right, and most importantly, we're going to have some fun. So if you're a young Frankenstein fan, this, as we had mentioned, this poster is certainly familiar, all of our favorite lovable characters, and so Hugo and I injected ourselves, as well as a little Frankenparker there at the bottom that we had custom created, or we created custom for our session. All right, well, one of the biggest things that we've always heard, and you hear it a little less with modern, is, can you make SharePoint not look like SharePoint? Right, that's kind of especially with Classic, but also a little bit more today with the modern experience. And in Classic, it was always a very simple, easy answer, and that was yes, we can. We can control every area of the DOM. We can control every aspect of the page from top to bottom by modifying the master page, and or by injecting user custom actions, and we can control it from pixel 00 to the very bottom of the page. In modern, though, that experience is a little bit more locked down. We've learned that there are areas of the DOM that Microsoft is holistically owning, and if we take on the responsibility and albeit the risk of modifying that area of the page, then we're very likely eventually going to get bitten, because they're going to make a change which is going to break our code and or our experience that we've added to enhance. And if we do that, that's only going to make the experience poor for our customers. Their trust in our solution is going to continue to lessen over time. And so we want to make sure that we're working within the confines, but we still want to be able to take advantage of providing an enhanced experience within SharePoint and our solutions that may show up in Teams as well. So we're going to talk about some safe ways, and I'm going to show you some tools in which you can utilize that today. So who can use these techniques, right? Well, power users. There's lots of opportunity for power users, even if you don't consider yourself a coder. We're going to go ahead and cover some techniques that you can take advantage of. That's very much in the low code area. UI designers who are looking to provide a feature-rich experience for their users that's a little beyond what the out-of-the-box components will give you. And then, of course, SPFx developers. So we really are looking for a wide spectrum of techniques to display for you today that you can take advantage of. So hopefully there's a little bit of something for everyone. Hugo, have you been able to join? I see a number there. Okay, he must still be having trouble. So I'm going to do my best to pretend to be Hugo. So I'm going to ask for your grace, and as I'm not going to do it as well as Hugo, but we do want to talk about how animations enhance user experience, right? What can we do? Well, we want to make sure that we take into consideration the time that's necessary, right? So when you look at this countdown, we want to consider the time that it takes before you make your point. So I've been saying that for a few seconds now, and you can see that time continues to tick down, 30 seconds, 10 seconds. And so we want to make sure that the user is not getting bored, right? So the amount of time that's taken when we're creating our animations is important. We don't want to have to make the user wait. We want the user to experience it immediately. So we think about how we can illustrate that an action is processed, and we can see here in this example that when we click on that hamburger menu, we see it animated into a close button, because likely what's going to happen is we're going to create or inject or open a menu. And so we can take advantage of some of these interactivities and these micro animations to illustrate that an action is being processed. We can also show an operation in progress. Right, so we can see that in this case we're refreshing, and so by way of pulling down, we're letting people know that something is happening in a fun, illustrative way without necessarily making it feel like it's taking forever. And so we can see that that rocket ship is launching off, and it provides, you know, a fun little experience, but you're also conveying the information appropriately. We want to also visualize how long an action will take. So we can take advantage of that when we think of progress bars occurring. We see that quite often. Simple progress bars are just moving from, you know, one maybe color block to the next over time. Here you can see how we're able to take advantage of two different images transitioning to kind of provide the experience that has taken place and the progress upon which that experience has and or is taking. Now, we also may want our users to focus their attention on crucial elements and information. And how can we use that? Well, you can see here by way of the use of iconography for the weather prediction, you don't even really need to look necessarily at the wording on the right to understand what is going on between the weather in those particular days. We see as it moves to the rain, we see the raindrops and the snow and the cloudy, then snow is dropping. And we, as humans, relate a little more to that. We can actually interpret that information faster, oftentimes through studies have shown that we'll interpret that information faster than if we had to read the information and understand some of the actual predictions that are being made. Obviously, the numbers would make a difference, but we wouldn't necessarily need to see the numbers to know what exactly was going on. So you see, it's a minor animation that occurs, but incredibly valuable. Secondly, we want it to feel natural, right? We don't want our animations to be necessarily gratuitous or feel injected for no other reason than just to entertain. You certainly still want the information that's being conveyed to be of the most important value of your experience. Animation, if you're running a game, is the experience, but likely for what we're doing within a SharePoint solution, animation should be the whipped cream and the cherry on top, in addition to the valuable information that our solution is providing. We also may want to think things to be a little bit more exciting with our experience, and so we can convey that by doing little micro animations as well. So as you see, as it's moving, we see a degree of physics going on there as it seems more natural as we swap and fly between these coupons. They kind of settled into place, and then we have a little additional animation making it a little bit more exciting and appealing when we're looking to potentially place an order for something like we see here. So it's ways in which we can utilize that as well. Hugo, did you get
You're doing a great job.
All right, Hugo has arrived. Yay! Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand it over to him, and he is going to talk about some guidelines. Hugo, just let me know when you want me to move to the next slide.
Awesome, thank you. If you can move on to the next slide, please. So some of the things we have to consider when we're creating animations is we have to consider the frequency of those animations. You can see on the slide now, we start with someone smiling and being happy, but eventually they turn not so happy. And that's usually the experience that we get with animations with our users, right? Users start with being delighted with your cool animations, but if you repeat the same animation over and over and over again, eventually it becomes more annoying than anything. And that initial delight is really becomes frustration for your users. If we can move on to the next slide, please. Duration is also something that we have to consider. The amount of time that your animation displays can actually affect the experience. If we move on to the next slide, please. So we start with, next please, we start with 100 milliseconds is really often it's too slow or too fast, sorry. It appears to be instant. So next slide, please. It appears to be instant to the users. And then the next slide is between 150 milliseconds and 350 milliseconds is the amount of time that it takes for the users to comprehend that there's an animation going on. So really what you want to do is you want your animation to be within 200 milliseconds to 500 milliseconds. And that's the animation sweet spot. That's enough time that your users will understand there's an animation without taking too long. And you know, with the timing, we also have to deal with the speed. So on the next slide, please. So you see here, the animation is showing kind of as we move, we're showing a little spinny circle. And it doesn't seem to be showing it too much on the screen right now, but you know, there's a little circle that's spinning, and the amount of time that it takes for that animation to do one full rotation can actually be perceived as affecting the performance. So if the circle is spinning too slowly, like it seems to be doing right now on the screen, the users will perceive the system as slower. But you can actually use animations to hide delays and keep the users engaged while you're actually doing something. Even if the performance is actually slower, if you keep the users engaged, they will actually perceive it as a highly performant system. So your users will keep occupied, you know, because you're giving them a visual feedback, and they actually think that it's actually faster. Now, the number of times that you cycle the animation, like the number of times you spin around a circle, for example, that also can increase perceived speed. So if you just did one rotation over that circle, it would, over a longer period of time, users would think the system is slow. But if you actually spin it a bit faster, users actually think that the system is working faster. Facebook, for example, has an animation that you may have never noticed, but when they load the screen, they actually load the shape of the text before they actually load the text. It happens really fast, but because you start seeing something really quickly, you have that perceived notion that Facebook is actually being a lot faster than it really is. And that's done instead of a traditional spinner. And that's actually, there's research that's been done. Viget did research where they found that users would actually prefer or would wait longer if they see a custom animation or a custom branded spinner as opposed to the generic, boring circle spinner that we see everywhere. On the next slide, please. So we also have to consider accessibility. Users that have an iPhone, since iOS 7, you may have noticed that you have the ability to disable the parallax effects. For those of you who don't know, the parallax effect is this animation on an iPhone that makes the foreground of the screen scroll at a different speed than the background of the screen. And that animation can actually trigger some people to feel motion sick. Animation should always be triggered by users. That way it's less likely to catch the users off guard. So an animation can be when I load or an action could be when I load the screen, or when I mouse over a button or I click on a button. But you don't want an animation to just randomly start happening. That's usually, that can catch the users off guard, and it can make them sick. And probably more importantly, we don't want big autoplay animations to happen. On the next slide is a good example of that. This is an actual website. I love this website, by the way. It's actually an actual website that's constantly changing. And the problem with this website is people who have any cognitive disabilities or just a limited attention span may have a difficulty trying to figure out what am I looking at, where am I looking at, where do I click. So you don't want to do this to your users. That's probably the last thing you want to do. For the points that David did a great job explaining on my behalf, you're really trying to use the animations as a way to attract the user's attention, not distract them. So on the next slide, please. So today, for our lab kit is going to include some things that, or mostly, or I think pretty much everything we have here is free, right? So we'll show you how to use a SharePoint site and SharePoint lists. We will use list formatting as a way to show animation and introduce delight to our users. We'll also show you a web part that's available for free in the formatting web part, which allows you to add a bit more formatting to your lists. And then we'll show you how to use the modern content query web part, which is also available for free, to actually load a customized rendering of your list, and we'll show you that shortly. And we'll use Visual Studio Code, which is also available for free, more when we start talking about the Mo code section. So with that, I'll
I think the audio is cutting out.
David.
Yep, thank you, Hugo. I think the audio is cutting out a little bit there too on the phone. So let's talk about our no-code techniques. You hear no-code and you think of SharePoint solutions, and you think, well, that's an oxymoron, like jumbo shrimp or pretty ugly, right? Doesn't seem to work well together when you're talking about complex solutions and no-code. A lot of people like to talk about no-code opportunities today, though, and while it may be a little misleading into thinking that there are actually is completely no-code techniques, everything has code behind it to a degree, but it doesn't mean that you had to write the code. right? There is a lot of assets and resources available to us that you can utilize without ever having to have written that code to begin with. And that technique is going to heavily use this copy and paste no code technique that we're going to demonstrate today. And so in this particular lab kit, the no code lab kit, we're going to start off with a SharePoint list web part. And we're going to utilize list formatting. Now, if you're familiar, if you're not familiar with the Patterns and Practices team, it's a team put together by Microsoft that includes some of the leaders and the team members are MVPs and Microsoft employees, but it's really contributed to by the entire community. And what we have available is how you can take list formatting examples and apply them to your information, to your list information, so that you can enhance the experience. And we're going to see what that'll look like kind of out of the box, but then how you can take it to the next level using some of these no-code opportunities and some of the resources that we identified. So the application areas for this particular lab kit is list formatting. We're going to see how you can take list formatting definitions that you've created, and you're going to be able to apply some of the principles that we're going to show using some animation techniques that we'll talk about. Now, I'm not going to get too caught up in the code at this time. Right, we're going to show you a demo here, but we're not going to cover all the finite details for the actual animation that's taking place, because there's a lot of resources we're going to give you and point you at the end. What we want you to focus on for this particular section, specifically because it's really considered a no-code section, is how you can just take examples that already exist and copy and paste them, and then how you can utilize additional resources to further enhance that experience within your list formatting definition. So let's go ahead and jump over to a demo. What we're looking at here is a list. I've got a list here. As you can see, it's in a site called It's Alive. It is a list of community contributors. Now, this list, if I were to go to all items, is simple, right? It is nothing more than a list behind the scenes. There are some columns here that we are able to populate information with, a picture, our emails, job titles, favorite sports, etc., stuff like that. What we're doing is we're using list formatting to create this Polaroid experience. And that looks great, looks very cool. We're taking the photo and the title, the name of the person that's in the community, and being able to display that information in a much more consumable, user-friendly, feature-rich way. And that'll look great on a page using the list web part. We can absolutely do that. And when we access or want to edit our current view, this is how we would do that. Our list formatting is located here. And while this particular topic and session is not on how to do list formatting, we want to further enhance the experience of these Polaroids. We want to make them maybe do something on a call to action, maybe a hover event. Well, what list formatting does not offer out of the box is the ability to instantiate hover events, which use pseudo techniques. So it's called pseudo elements or pseudo attributes that you can use within your CSS. But what list formatting only provides you is the ability to do inline style. So we see that we're doing some formatting right here for floating and padding, background color and box shadow to provide that little shadow effect of the hovering of the Polaroid, right? But if we wanted to provide any call to action techniques using some of those pseudo elements or attributes on perhaps a hover or an active or clicked or something like that, we don't really have that opportunity directly through the list formatting. But it doesn't mean that we can't still take advantage of adding some of an animated experience to our solution. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here to a no-code page. What we've got is a page. This is a live SharePoint page. And we've put the out-of-the-box list web part on the page and just went ahead and set it to show that particular view. Right, so the list formatting is bubbled up, and so it shows on a page a very cool way to maybe even create a customized looking web part without really having to create a customized web part, right? We're able to leverage that. But what if we wanted to do some animation, as I had mentioned? Well, first of all, it's important to know that the question may be, aren't you overwriting the area of the DOM that you don't own, right? We don't own the list web part. Microsoft created that, and that's true. But what we do own is we own the classes that are associated to this particular list formatting definition, right? So here I'm able to identify class names like Polaroid and Polaroid 8 and all these different class names, PNP community member photo, right? Those are class names that I do own. I'm actually creating the class names for the CSS there. So is there a way then for me to be able to add additional CSS to this page without having to write a bunch of code? And there is. One of those web parts is the enhanced list formatting web part. Now, this is a web part that was created by the community and is available for free. And we'll give you URLs on how to access it throughout the demo here. But this is a web part that allows you to inject CSS that can live here on the page and then be coupled with the list formatting HTML that we created. So let's go ahead and add that. Now, there's a little bit of a warning here, and it's important to take note of because this is very, very important. We've all probably heard of Spider-Man, and we may think of the Spider-Man principle. Great power comes great responsibility. It is absolutely the case because with this web part, because this web part allows you to customize and add custom CSS to the page upon which you are adding it to. Now, can that CSS override out of the box class names and styles and HTML that Microsoft owns? Yes. Can Microsoft change that and break our styles? Yes. So we want to make sure we are a superhero, not a supervillain. We want to take the Spider-Man approach, not the Green Goblin approach, and we want to use this for good, not evil. And in this case, using it to enhance the experience of our list formatting definition within the list web part is absolutely a heroic move. So we're going to go ahead and accept the terms because we definitely don't want blue screens of death. We don't want users calling us, telling us why SharePoint is broken. That's exactly what would happen if we were to use this for evil and Microsoft changes class name and breaks our styles. We certainly wouldn't want that. So when we accept the terms and conditions, we're provided with an opportunity to add custom styles. And we see that that's already opened over here. We have enhanced list formatting. We can use this web part to inject custom CSS. Now, what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to copy what I have off screen here is some CSS that's going to take our Polaroids and add a little effect animation to them. And so if you notice, it happened maybe without even you seeing it. It created a kilter effect to them. Right now, it looks a little more scattered on the page. So they're able to look a little more natural, random, right? Life is not always perfect lined Polaroids sitting up on a wall or something like that. There's always a little bit of a skew to them. But even above that, we're able to now kind of hover over, right? So now I can hover over using that pseudo attribute for hover, and I can bring to the forefront what it is that I'm particularly wanting to see a little more detail on. Right? So now just by adding that CSS and some simple styles here, and again, I don't want to get too deep, but we're just really looking at using some transformation right here, and you could always open this up within this web part to see a little more, but I'm simply scaling the images on hover, right, changing their box shadow, and affecting the rotation a little bit. So very simple animation, but adds a nice little experience as we hover over and bring to the forefront each of these community contributors. But wait, there's more. What else could we do with just CSS and CSS animation? So let's go ahead and re-engage. I'm going to go ahead and open this up, and I'm going to remove everything that's there, and I'm going to paste in some new CSS. And now we see a couple things have happened. We see that the font has changed, right? So now if we go down and look at Bo, we see it was a very just basic looking font before. Now it looks a little more handwritten, right? When we get those Polaroids, for those of us that are, old enough to remember them, and now they've come back into popularity. My daughter wants one, and I'm like, you have one on your phone. Why do you need a Polaroid? But we always would handwrite a little message here. So now it looks a little more natural. We've changed the coloring of our Polaroid photo to black and white, right? But that's not all. When we now hover, we're able to bring back to life the experience of our of our original photo. So now, not only are we bringing to the forefront the actual person we're hovering over, the community contributor we're hovering over, we're now bringing to life a little more of that particular community contributor by enhancing the color, and now it pops out amongst all the others. We see that that particular community contributor stands out more than just a scale, they stand out from the color as well. But wait, there's more. We can add even more to our animations here to provide a better experience. So let's go ahead and go back in, and we'll remove the code here. And again, I'm just going to paste in some more things going on here. We see that what has happened is we've now gotten a little heart that is showing up right there for us. Now this may be something that we may want to link behind the scenes if we're going to get a little more into our solution in terms of feature rich. We may want to link that to a hyperlink. Perhaps there's a hyperlink API that allows us to track favorites of community contributors or something like that. It doesn't even have to be necessarily SharePoint Framework code, but it might just be a hyperlink that then tracks who it is that clicked on what. That could all be handled for us. But now we see that our font is still there. We see that when I hover over the Polaroid, it brings it to the forefront. It brings it to life through the color. And what happens when I hover over the heart? A nice little explosion occurs, right? And I can hover over that. I could make that a click event if I needed to. But when I hover over it, we see a nice little animation sprite occurring there. And all this has been done. You notice I didn't necessarily write any lines of code. There is zero JavaScript going on here. This is 100% CSS. 100% CSS. Everything you've seen so far, from the creation of the list formatting, which is using HTML and CSS, to the normal feeling scattering of the images, to the drop shadow, to the font, to the color rendering from black and white to color, to the hover and the animation on the heart. 100% CSS. So want to express to you, when we talk about no code, CSS may be considered code, but largely by most in the community, it's considered a style language. You're not really doing any functional programming here with this. And you have keyframes for your animation, but you can see how simple it was to create this. And now, if we publish this, we have what looks like a completely custom solution that is nothing more than CSS and list formatting. Pretty amazing feat here when you think about what we're able to accomplish within the modern experience by doing nothing but creating a list, adding a list formatting definition, and adding some CSS to the page. All right, let's go back to our slides and let's look at the resources that were used. So we utilized, sorry, that is low code. My apologies. Let's go back to no code resources. There we go. So we utilize the list formatting samples. You can see all of those samples. And I talked about copying and pasting. There are over 100 samples there that you can literally copy and paste. And if you're interested in seeing a demo on list formatting, reach out to me. I've got a session that I do on list formatting that takes you from the very beginning. If you've not been yet experienced with it or had any experience with it yet, please don't hesitate to reach out. Would love to give you that session, even privately and one-on-one if you'd like. We also use the PNP list formatting enhancer web part. That's what we use to be able to add the styles to the page. And again, that is a great power, comes great responsibility, opportunity there for us. So we want to utilize that in an appropriate way. All right, let's move up in the world. Let's talk about low code techniques. Well, what is low code, right? Now we're looking at using interactive user-driven triggers. So this is going to utilize things that we built upon within the no code experience. So we're going to take advantage of HTML, CSS, and now though we're going to take advantage of JavaScript, right? So we're going to look and see how we can utilize some JavaScript techniques to up the ante a little bit more. Right, but what we're not going to cover in this section is SPFx. That's going to be more for the Mo code, which Hugo will talk about in just a few moments. But for this, we are going to utilize HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. But you don't have to worry about creating an SPFx package. There are still tools here that you can utilize absolutely today without writing a single line of SPFx code. So what are those resources that we're going to use. Our low-code lab kit is going to utilize the modern content query web part, and it's going to take advantage of the same SharePoint list data that we already looked at. Okay, the modern content query web part allows us to take advantage of handlebar templating, and handlebar templating allows us to enhance the and customize the HTML experience combined with JavaScript. So we're able to take advantage of that. So what are some of the application areas? Well, we want to create an interactive web part using list data with CSS and JavaScript. So we're seeing all this tie together. So let's take a look at that demo. All right. So here we've got our low-code experience. Now this was created, if I edit the page, this was created with the modern React content query web part. So if you ever use the content query web part in Classic, then this will be familiar to you. But of course, in Classic, you had to use XSL. That was always confusing and frustrating and very restricting. Not many people really knew what XSL was like. In fact, I remember interviewing someone and saying once, how much experience do you have with XSL? And they said, I use Microsoft Excel all the time. Yeah, I feel your pain, right? No one really wants to know it, even when they have to know it. But in this case, the content query web part, while super full feature rich, for example, can be cross-site collection, it allows us to use handlebar templates. So we're able to identify a custom handlebar template, which again, we're not going to get too deep into the code. We just want you to absorb what it is that you can do with these resources, because the code is not super complex for these samples by way of comparison to much deeper and bigger solutions. But we wanted you to understand how you can take advantage of these solutions and these resources. And so we're using a handlebar template, which calls our .html file. That's where our handlebar template lives. And then we're going to go ahead and call in just some code tools. In this case, just using a simple jQuery reference. It's not always the best anymore, but it is one of the more popular that's still used, so it doesn't have to be excluded. And then we're going to have a JS file that supports our experience here, right? So that's how we're going to be able to utilize handlebar helpers, which utilize really just raw basic JavaScript. Okay, so let's go ahead and republish this. And the first thing you'll notice when I refresh, and let me refresh it again, keep an eye on the names, right? You'll notice that as I refresh, those names kind of blur into experience or into focus, right? So now immediately we're able to kind of start bringing to attention what matters here. Oh, okay, these are our community contributors and they have names. And so who are they? What do they do? We want to take advantage of getting to know them. What we have though is the same experience going on, right? And so we're able to see now when I click on that, as opposed to just being something that hovers on the heart, it now continues to beat, showing me that I had some interaction with it, right? I was able to see some change that has occurred and track that change as I go through the state. Now that may be something that occurs if we did particularly connect this to an API where we're identifying favorites or people we want to follow or something like that. Then we could certainly go ahead and utilize that kind of technique, and that's using some simple JavaScript. And the same could be said all around here. Emily, we love Emily and April, and of course we love all of our community contributors here, so we would heart them all if we could. Now we're going against a little bit of a wall here according to what Hugo had mentioned. We may not want our hearts to be repeating on this page perpetually, right? We may not want them to just continue to sit there and beat and beat and beat, because if we were to load this and we like all of them, and then we load that and we instantiate that animation on the page load, you could imagine that all these heart beatings occurring at the page may feel like sensory overload. And that's not what we would want. But we're letting them continue to beat just because we know there's a delay in the video sometimes, and being able to see everything might be hard to do. So we wanted to, give the impression of what it is that you can do. So that's really cool. So now just using a little bit of JavaScript and some HTML, we're able to take advantage of a little deeper animation occurring here within this experience. But wait, there's more. What if we wanted to have a call to action beyond the heart? right? So now what I've done is I've added a low-code 2 page, and it's using the same information, the same list data, same community contributors. But now when I hover over a card or a Polaroid, watch what happens. Now I'm able to kind of change what's happening on that, and I can understand a little bit more now in a very passive way. That information doesn't necessarily need to be loaded for each of these when the page loads. But I would like to know a little bit more about Katie or April or Alex or Elio or any of these people before I follow them. Perhaps I don't know them and I'm in an organization where I'd like to learn a little bit more about the person before I follow them. And so now what you can do is you can come in here and I'm able to add a little more information about the user in a much engaging way, right? We see that zoom effect occurs and it brings to the forefront a little more information. I can learn about Hugo, and then I could click on follow on Twitter, or I could change that to learn more about Hugo on Twitter or see Twitter, or it could be learn more about Hugo in his profile or something like that. But the point is, then I can do that and I can click on the heart and I can now follow Hugo and learn a little bit more and keep involved and alerted when Hugo is made a change or whatever it is that API would connect to. But you can see by way of these animations, it just gives us a way to access more information in an appealing way, but without being obtrusive. And we're actually making it functional as well. So it's useful, it's entertaining, and it's functional, but it's not annoying and it's not overdone. All right. So let's go ahead and move forward and talk about what those low-code resources were. The PNP Modern Content Query web part is available at the SPFx web parts URL there, aka that will take you to the PNP GitHub repo. Some of the resources we used here were the Animista, and so you can take advantage of those particular animations and learn a little bit more there. And now what we're going to do is we've covered the low code, or excuse me, the no code, right? We've covered the low code. What's next? Mo code. And for that, I'm going to hand it over to Hugo to take you into that Mo code opportunity.
Thank you, David. I feel like I've been watching an infomercial about CSS animations. So with the Mo code, what we'll be doing is we'll show you some advanced techniques here. Again, what we've done so far is we've tried to leverage as much as possible the SharePoint lists. We've tried to leverage some web parts so that we're not breaking the rules. We're not affecting cascading style sheets classes that we don't own, and we're not injecting JavaScript on the page like we used to do with the master pages. So we're actually going to use a little bit more code. We're going to use libraries, or one library as an example. That makes it easier for us to do some animations. So Mo code normally would involve some SharePoint Framework development, but in this example, we're actually leveraging the web parts that we've built already. We're also going to use some advanced animation frameworks. So there are a lot of libraries out there that are available, some that are available for free, some that you have to pay for. So we'll show you how you would use these animation frameworks to do this. And then we'll show you some physics-driven animation. So in our lab kit here, we're going to reuse the content query web part because if you remember, it allows us to create a custom handlebars template and inject JavaScript and CSS. We'll use an animation framework, and for this one, we'll use an animation framework called GreenSock. We're not sponsored by GreenSock or anything like that. We just happen to both David and I use GreenSock quite a bit. So we felt that it was a good example of using an animation framework that we love. And where we're going to demo these, so we'd want to leverage, obviously, the animation frameworks to enhance mundane tasks. So let's do that.
I'm just going to give you a little 5-minute warning.
Yes, thank you.
No worries.
We are wrapping up. Thank you. So here's an example here of a sample that GreenSock has created. And they have a library called Draggable. And what they do is they give you the ability to drag some elements on a page. And the way they do it is they have the HTML for rendering the divs, and then they have the cascading style sheet to make it look the way it looks with the green. But the important part here is the JavaScript, that what it does is it registers the draggable plugin, and then they have all the code to handle dragging and dropping the elements. So what we've done is we've actually leveraging the same web parts that David has shown and the same styles that David has shown before. We've done the same thing where you can now, let's say you wanted to start prioritizing elements on a page. We've actually added some code here to do just that. And how we've done this, and I'm going to wrap this up really quickly here. How we've done this is we've used the content query web part, just like we did before. If you look a little bit at the bottom here, we're using a different template here that is our MoCode template. Again, we'll make these resources available to you. But this is the magic here, is we're using, again, we were using the jQuery before. We are also including Greenstock's animation framework. And we are including the draggable component that we've shown before. That's the one that makes it easy for us to handle dragging animations. And finally, the code that we've created to actually handle dragging and dropping of these elements. So all of this is done within the design constraints or the supportability constraints of SharePoint, because again, we are not editing anybody else's CSS or HTML but our own. And the JavaScript is only affecting our own elements. I'm going to wrap this up now. So the resources here for this web part, again, is the content query web part, which is available on aka.ms SPFx-web part. And you can use Greenstock. There are other libraries out there. You don't have to use Greenstock, but the sample that we've shown here is using Greenstock. So some resources, again, we're putting these URLs here so you have access to them. One of the resources that we've shown earlier, or we talked a little bit earlier, is a site called animista.net, and they make it really easy for you to kind of design animations and then preview them, and you can copy and paste them onto your page. With that, we're wrapping it up. Thank you. My name is Hugo. I can be reached on Twitter, and this is my blog. And David?
Yes, David Warner, Warner Digital. Please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you very much for attending. We always love to collaborate, the both of us, so please don't ever hesitate to connect with us.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Are there any questions?
There was one question on will it save the order when we move? I'm answering it, but if you would like to quickly answer it audibly as well. When you moved the Greenstock animation, does it save the order and change the order?
Yeah, so in the sample, we did not do that, but that was just to keep the sample simple. That's hard to say. What we actually do is you could call, we would use PNPJS to go store the order, and it really depends whether you'd want the order to be for each individual to kind of decide their own preference, or for everyone to decide an order for, you know, like an administrator, for example, to control the order of objects. But it can absolutely do that. And again, if you'd like an example of how to do this, just reach out to us and we'll show you how we've done that. I hope that answers your question.
All right, well, thank everybody again. Hope you're enjoying the 3-day event, and we really appreciate you attending.
Thank you again, both David and Hugo, and stay tuned for the next session.
Thank you.